Good afternoon, Mayor Allen. Once we have quorum of council on camera, you may start the.
Thank you. I believe that is now. So could I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order? Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, that the special meeting of council of the Township of Springwater of November 8, 2021 come to order at 5 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Due to COVID-19, council is taking the necessary steps to limit in-person meetings, and therefore we are holding this meeting with council and staff virtually, and it is being live streamed. You can watch the meeting live at the township's website, www.springwater.ca. You can listen to it live from a telephone by calling 647-558-0588 and using the ID 842-6781-4144 and the pound sign. This option is available during the meeting. And if you want to watch the live stream after the meeting, you can watch the video on the township's YouTube channel. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest with what we're dealing with tonight, council? Okay, seeing none, before I turn it over to Director Spagnell to introduce the topic, can I have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor? Councillor Cabral and Councillor Maude Chapman. Okay, I will turn over the floor to Director Spagnell to discuss Simcoe County Municipal Comprehensive Review, Springwater's comments.
Thank you, Mayor Allen and members of council. As noted, the special meeting tonight is really to discuss the County of Simcoe Comprehensive Review. It's to provide council with some information about the technical reports that have been prepared as part of this process so far. The purpose is also to go over staff comments that are suggested to be presented and submitted to the county for the county's consideration of the MCR process, and also to canvass council on any additional comments that council would like to have submitted in alongside with staff comments. Council is aware that the county has retained a number of consultants to deal with an extensive number of studies to form and inform the municipal comprehensive review process at the county level. At the end of the day, the purpose of the MCR is to update the county official plan with new county policies to deal specifically with natural heritage considerations, the agricultural system mapping, a climate change strategy, an updated watershed plan, and also dealing with growth management that deals with a land needs assessment. It will also go over what the county will be prescribing for its density targets with respect to greenfield development and intensification. So it's quite an extensive process that the county is undertaking. And as part of this initial review, those are the key studies that we're going to be talking about tonight. In addition to that, the county is also working on an employment strategy. And as follow-up to, I guess, the outreach program and the comments that are obtained through this process, they are going to be working towards amending and providing draft policies for their official plan. So, as I said, it's a very extensive and comprehensive process that the county is going through. As part of this round of comments have to be provided for November 12th or prior to November 12th. For all of the studies, with the exception of the natural heritage study, the natural heritage comments can be submitted up until December 3rd. Staff has included comments that can be submitted up to November 12th, and is really just waiting for additional information for that regarding that study in order to have a more holistic set of comments provided. So what I'm going to do, Mayor Allen and Council, is I'm just going to summarize what some of the objectives are of each report and provide a general summary of what the comments are that staff is suggesting to submit. I'm in council's hands as to whether or not council wants to ask questions as we go along or wait until the end. I'll leave it up to you, Mayor Allen, just to direct on how you'd like that to go.
I think it probably best, because of the meatiness of each of the topics and reports, to pause after each report and take some questions and discussions if we could, Director.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Allen.
Thank you.
So the first MCR report that we'll go over is related to refinements to the natural heritage system mapping that's being completed by the county. The consultant that completed the mapping is North South Environmental Inc. And there's a number of maps that are provided for in the links that have been attached to the links to the staff report that's on the agenda, which outlines some considerable mapping refinements that are being done to the natural heritage system. The purpose of the natural heritage mapping is to identify the locations within each municipality in the county of Simcoe that will be subject to natural heritage policies within the plan. And the purpose of those policies will be to protect natural heritage features, but also pay attention to the fact that there's natural heritage systems. So there's connections and corridors that need to be represented and included within those, I would say, those protection policies that the county is going to be working towards implementing through this MCR process. In addition to that, the process is also intended to refine the provincial mapping. So the province came in with a broad-based, or I'd say a broad-brushed natural heritage map that I would want to say about 3 years ago now. And just based on comments that were provided through that process, I guess the end result and the findings of the province was that they had to go to the local municipalities, or at the very least the county level, to try to refine the mapping so that they were going to have, so that their mapping was correct. So as a result, there is some draft mapping that's available on the county website. And in essence, what it does is it provides a lot of overlap of the natural heritage system into agricultural lands. Staff's comments basically are saying that overlap should be limited to ensure that there isn't any negative impact or impediment to farming operations as a result of natural heritage policies that may not necessarily apply to the lands that they're being overlapped onto. One of the suggestions also, as part of staff's comments, is that the mapping be condensed so that it's broken down into municipality by municipality, so that between staff, local residents, council, that specific areas where the mapping will overlap can be seen at a more clear state with 3 maps versus, say, for example, the 10 maps that are overlapping with surrounding municipalities. And then more specifically, staff in the review of the mapping identified the fact that the existing Bertram Industrial, Apto Glen Estates subdivision, and the Marnie Lane subdivision were actually considered in part of the natural heritage mapping, and are suggesting that those pockets be deleted. And that's a general overview of the natural heritage mapping that's currently up for review by the county.
Okay, just an overall question. Why are the dates for comment different for heritage versus all others? Because agriculture, for instance, involves the same review of mapping and commenting where there are anomalies with respect to the mapping.
Mayor Allen, I really think that it comes down to the fact that the mapping was just recently released, and there may be additional information that the county is coming forward with over the next couple of weeks that will also inform the mapping a little bit more. So I think it's really related to the timing that the mapping was released.
And the maps that you indicate there, 28, 33, right through to 46 for the identified lands, would that be all of the maps that we have comment on, or to your other points, are there pieces of agricultural land on other maps that unless and until they're pointed out could create restrictions on that farmland overlap?
Mayor Allen, the maps that are pointed out under that column are spring water related maps. So there's overlap into other municipalities. So those maps that staff have included are maps that specifically relate to spring water. Now, when you look across the county, the same approach has been taken with respect to other municipalities where there is an overlap of natural heritage lands onto agricultural lands. The rationale that's been provided by the county and by the environmental consultant is that you have other considerations that aren't necessarily tied to the feature. So for example, there may be areas that are identified as floodplain that may need to be included under that natural heritage mapping. The point that staff's trying to make is that the overlap should not be extensive. It should be reduced to the amount where it's going to have as least of an impediment on the farming operation as possible.
Yeah, because you state a significant amount of the agricultural land is included within the fringes of the growth plan natural heritage mapping. So how do we ensure that at a micro level, all of this gets reviewed and commented upon case by case, map by map to the county?
I think, to be honest with you, I don't think the county is going to undertake a case by case type review or a property by property review. They're going to look at this as more of a system type map where it's meant to capture the system in the corridors. And I think the reason for that is because if the county goes on a case by case basis where there's any brush of green over agricultural land, then they'll never get through this process. And it's really a matter of trying to ensure that what is being included is part of that natural heritage system, and that there isn't any, and that, as I said, the amount of ag lands included in that should be reduced as much as possible and should really be refined to what the actual system looks like and was actually part of that natural heritage system.
Well, if perchance the some agricultural land is still included within the heritage boundaries, won't that significantly restrict what can be done on that agricultural land?
Mayor Allen, it could. It just depends on the types of policies that the county establishes to deal with existing agricultural operations. So for example, if you've gotten, and it's stated in the comments, existing cropped agricultural land should be able to be cropped and should continue to be cropped. There shouldn't be any impediment to that as a result of the natural heritage mapping because it's a long-standing use for agricultural purposes. So really it comes down to the policies that are going to be set in place through this process that are going to, determine what farmers can do in these areas. So it's once those policies are provided, then staff will do another review of the policies to see what the potential impacts will be of the mapping and the policies that the county brings forward as part of their updated plan.
And what's the time frame of those further clarification of policies?
Well, they're looking to have the entire MCR process with amended policies in place by, I believe it was July 2022. So I would have to think that as far as the timing of this, we're looking at anywhere from 2 to 3 months after we go through the process of dealing with the background studies and the reports that are before council tonight.
And there'll be another comment period at that stage?
That is correct, yes.
And so I see Councillor Hannan, I want to switch to it, but I just want to end this point. So who is it up to go on a case by case, farm by farm review and make the specific comments to the county? I mean, if we're not doing it at the township and the county's not doing it, that leaves it up to the property owner to have to do it. Is that correct?
I would say that that is correct, Mayor Allen. Now, the one thing I would like to point out is that planning staff did meet with Agricultural Advisory Committee. I want to say it was a couple of years ago. We're kind of been in a time warp, I think, just given the times that we're in right now. But planning staff did go to Agricultural Advisory Committee with the natural heritage mapping, and comments were provided, essentially indicating that that mapping should not encroach into the agricultural areas for pretty much the reasons that are stated within staff's comments.
Okay, Councillor Hannah.
Thanks, Mayor, and through you to Director Spagnuolo. I don't mind admitting I'm a little confused, because when I read this and I thought of natural heritage mapping, I thought of natural heritage sites, and maybe if you could explain, for my benefit anyway, the difference between natural heritage sites versus natural heritage mapping, because when I saw that Apto Glen and Marnie Lane and Bertram's was not included, I was totally confused. So anything you can do to help me, I'd appreciate it.
Director.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Hannah. So natural heritage, a natural heritage feature is a specific feature. So it could be a woodlot, it could be a water body, it could be a river, it could be a lake. Those would all be considered to be what your standard natural heritage features would be. What's being mapped right now through the county process and what the province wants to refine is what's called a natural heritage system. So that's dealing with the corridors that link those systems together. And what ends up happening is when you start to link a natural heritage system, there's pockets that tend to be joined through that mapping to connect the system to show where those connections are. So you've got a feature that gets identified, and then there's the entire system that gets identified. And through this process, through the county's MCR process, the county is trying to refine that system that was originally put forward by the province.
Follow up, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. And so Director Spagnuolo, what makes these sites that are listed here, Marnie Lane and Apto Glen and so on, different than, say, some other community in Springwater, be it Greenfield or someplace else, that makes the ones that you identified as being in the heritage map versus the other ones?
Director.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So through you, Mayor Allen. So really what's happened is those settlements have been included within the natural heritage system. So portions of those subdivisions have been included within that. And what staff is saying, they shouldn't be, because they're not part of that natural heritage system. They're developed lands and they should not be included.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn. Out of curiosity to Director Spagnuolo, years ago we had an open house, I believe, at the municipality, and I'm not sure if it was for the Greenbelt or if it was for natural heritage, but the comments received, if it was natural heritage, are those accompanying this report?
Director.
Through Mayor Allen to the Deputy Mayor Coughlin, those comments per se are not being included as part of this. These are separate comments provided by staff. However, from the open houses that staff have been involved in prior to this on a number of occasions with respect to natural heritage or agriculture, a lot of those comments do follow along the same lines related to the potential impacts on the farming operations and the ability of farmers to do things without having red tape to continue on with those operations. And I really can say that as far as over the years, that has been a consistent comment that has been relayed and has been expressed by the farming community in my discussions, either through Agricultural Advisory Committee or any of the outreach processes that we've done previously with respect to natural heritage mapping.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Director Spagnuolo. I take great comfort in knowing that staff has taken this approach towards the natural heritage. Natural heritage is just another name for environmental. So But I take great comfort in knowing that you've reached out, you're listening to the farmers, because you're right, there's enough red tape there to go around for everyone as far as that goes. Question is, the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture, have they got to comment on this at all, Director?
I can comment on that, seeing as how I sit on the Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture. I have been keeping them apprised. As recently as over the weekend, I talked to Paul Maurice and your brother, Dave Ritchie, at Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture, and made sure they are tuned into this session and have the links to the reports. And they informed me that they will be having a response by the November 12th deadline.
Thank you. One more question to the Director, if you don't mind, Mayor Allen.
Yes.
Please. I'm in regards to all the lands that the county owns. Do these policies and these studies, does it apply to the lands to the county as well?
Director?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Ritchie. For contiguous woodlots, I would say that the majority of these designations would apply to those. Now, what I can say is that when if you're speaking to where you're looking at forestry and the harvesting that the county does, the county does a lot of selective cutting and things like that fall within the guidelines of what would be forest management and whatnot. But I would have to say that a lot of the county lands do fall under the natural heritage system mapping that's being considered.
Follow on.
Marilyn, I was going to wait till the end, but I may as well just, to me, I find this to be a great concern. The county owns in excess of well over 30,000 acres in the county. They own vast amounts of land, and there's tracts of land that is of poor value. Yes, they could go trees on it, but we're in such a housing crisis. Some of these lands would be suitable for building. That's one thing I want to point out. Secondly, there's some nice tracts of land in Springwater Township, and I'm sure in other municipalities within the county, that are prime aggregate properties that should be put up and put on the block and let the gravel companies bid on them. And this would take the pressure off of what's going on up there at the Waverly Uplands. So my question is to the Director and to you, Mayor Allen, like these final decisions, who makes this? Is it the Minister of Municipal Affairs? Because this should be spoken up and talked about. There's 2 points of interest there, and I wish you sit on that on the county. The Deputy Mayor Coggan sits on that, and those are points of interest that should be brought up and discussed about. You are our voice up there on the county level, and this should be brought forward. And there's excellent tracts of land that could be developed, whether it be aggregate, whether it be for development, and I don't think anything has ever bothered to be said. We need to stop sitting on our hands and do something. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Do you have any further comments before I move on to the next report, Director Spagnell?
Yes, Mayor Allen. The only thing I'd like to clarify, it is the minister, it's the county that makes that adopts any official plan amendments at the county level, which then has to be approved by the ministry. So that's just to provide Councillor Ritchie with an answer to his question about the approvals. And
I appreciate that, and thank you. I kind of thought that, but thank you, Marilyn. Thank you.
Okay, Director Spagnell.
Okay, so the next mapping refinement relates, it's related to what we were just talking about, and that's tied to the provincial agricultural system review and refinement mapping. The county's required to do this as part of a provincial exercise to bring the county plan also into conformity with the growth plan. And again, it's similar to the natural heritage exercise where the outreach is looking to refine the provincial mapping through the MCR process. One of the key considerations is that the agricultural mappings, the agricultural system, is not intended to be carried on and into the settlement areas. And the reason for that is that the settlement areas have been identified through the existing county official plan as areas where growth is to be directed. And really the end result of this portion of the MCR will be to really refine an agricultural system map to ensure that ag lands continue to be farmed and that there's rigid restrictions on development on agricultural land outside of settlement areas. Specifically, staffs come in with comments to indicate that some topographical imagery or aerial photos would be helpful to be able to take a look at where the agricultural mapping extends. On that basis, it would make it easier to review that mapping to ensure that it's accurate. And in addition, it would also make it easier to ensure that we do not have any overlap of agricultural lands moving into the settlement area boundaries. In particular, staff's outlined not a situation, but an instance where the agricultural system mapping has overlapped into Hillsdale, and staff are specifically saying that any agricultural mapping or any agricultural land use designations in Hillsdale at the provincial and county level be removed from the settlement area of Hillsdale, as per the official plan amendment 37, which is approved and in effect.
Have there been other examples other than Hillsdale that you've observed this to be the case?
Mayor Allen, Hillsdale was the only settlement area where it was blatantly obvious that there was some overlap into the settlement areas, which is why staff is asking that we have an overlay of showing the topographical mapping, but also, and actually that triggers that, is that from what I could tell from the mapping, it did not show the settlement area boundaries as well, which would be helpful just to confirm that the agricultural system mapping was not encroaching into those areas.
But again, this is a case where the residents should be looking at this mapping. Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture, the OFA, studying it on a municipality by municipality basis and making comment about specific encroachments into agricultural land. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Allen.
Okay. Further comments, questions about this report?
And I think just to add on the impact, the same way that the mapping needs to be accurate for agricultural purposes, there may be designations and there may be properties out there, to your point, Mayor Allen, where it's definitely worth their while to take a look at this mapping to confirm that they're not being included as part of the agricultural system mapping. Because as I said, the policies around agriculture are very restrictive in the sense that those lands are to be used for agricultural purposes. If there are any pre-existing approvals through designation or zoning, mostly for designation, those property owners are going to want to pay attention to where this mapping, whether or not this mapping includes them.
How are we communicating this? I know there has been communication, but this is a pretty important step that requires individual work by individual farmers and organizations. How do you think it would be best to reiterate, emphasize, communicate this, Director?
Mayor Allen, well, I think it's somewhat difficult to at the local level to broadcast and communicate to local residents. I mean, we've done this through our agricultural advisory committee to let them know that this is going on. But for the most part, we would rely on the county's notification process with respect to the MCR.
Yeah. Councillor Cabral.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen. And I guess through to Director Spagnol, even from the beginning, my question was, when we're talking about the mapping, in particular, it sounds like topographical maps are quite useful. Is it that the maps are not detailed enough at the level with which you want to be able to see these features? And it also sounds like boundary delineations are not being included properly, so that when someone looks at these maps, like maybe not yourself, but someone who would be a farmer or whatnot, they really wouldn't understand where they're actually at in relationship to their property per se, in relationship to any of these areas that are being spoken of. Is that kind of right?
Director?
Mayor Allen, through to Councilor Cabral, I would say the more detail that's provided so that residents and any stakeholders can really see where their properties lie in the grand scheme of things is definitely more helpful. And that's really the essence of staff's comments, is that if that additional information can be provided so that residents, council, staff, or any other stakeholder groups, so that they have the ability to see where their specific interest lies within this mapping. Right now, the way it's set up, based on what I've reviewed, is unless you know the exact location of those settlement area boundaries just through working within the policy documents, it'd be difficult to see where your property lies within that mapping.
Excuse me, follow on, Mayor Allen?
Yes.
Based on mapping scale, would it be possible, I mean, maybe not the county, if they did not want to pursue this and provide that, would it be possible for us to delineate those boundaries so that they can be used both in-house and for our own agricultural, farmers and whoever else might need them to see what they can do on their piece of property? Is that something that could be done?
Director?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councilor Cabral. Staff could definitely do that internally. The only question and consideration is the fact that we're dealing with county maps. And if we're manipulating and doing overlays and whatnot, we just have some concerns about the accuracy of doing that. So that's why staff's recommending to the county that they go through the process of doing that just for accuracy, so that can't be disputed later on down the road.
Okay, moving on, please, Director.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The next one is it's a study on climate change, and I can tell you that the reference to climate change has been in the growth plan for quite some time. But for local municipalities, there isn't that much work that has actually been done on climate change. Now, as a result of the county's process and changes to provincial policy and the growth plan, again, the county is to include climate change policies within their official plan. Generally speaking, the major focus of the climate change policies would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That can be done in many fronts. It's climate change is not one of those things that can be dealt with through one aspect. It can't be dealt with through land use planning. It can't be dealt with through transportation planning. It's a whole number of considerations. But specifically with planning, the report looks at the consideration of intensification. It looks at increased densities. It looks at communities that support transit, active transportation, all in the realm of having a complete community. A couple of the recommendations coming out of the report, really they break them down into short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations. Generally speaking, the short-term are using provincial policy as a guiding tool to form your climate change policies. Overall, it's committing to future processes and trying to establish what those objectives would be. The big one here is creating a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for various sectors, being buildings, transportation, and then using that analysis to inform your official plan. The one point about that staff has relayed on a couple of occasions as it relates to that is that not all municipalities are well versed in climate change. And not all municipalities have the resources and the expertise to go through and the funding to go through what would be included within a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So the comments coming in from staff on this matter are really that at the county level, and the county has stated that this is where they're going as part of these, as these recommendations, is that there needs to be a clear, distinct role between what the county's responsibilities are and what the local municipalities' responsibilities are. And those need to be aligned with the available resources when we're looking at dealing with these things. There are two specific aspects through the emissions inventory that are looked at. There's fleet, and then there's buildings that are referenced within the reports. And as I said, it's from staff's perspective, staff understands and sees that there's a need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's a no-brainer. It's how we get there and how do we do that while recognizing that resources are limited at the local level.
Councillor Hannah?
Got it. Thank you, Mayor, and through you to the director. I don't see mention in there about solar, and I know solar used to be a lot of rebates from the government and so on. They've been reduced significantly, but we're eventually building a new fire hall, double rinks possibly, great amount of roofing that would cover a lot of solar panels. So I'm just suggesting that maybe if the rest of the council agrees, this might be something that we could suggest that be promoted toward the county level, and maybe they'll pass it on to the province. But I really think that if you want to do anything about greenhouse gases and well, like I say, in the arena or the new fire hall, solar would certainly help to do that.
Director Spagnell?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Hannah. So there are other options that are referenced within the report that deals with building code requirements and net zero. There's other ways of retrofitting buildings so that they're more efficient from an energy perspective. So those are picked up in there. And then as far as the incentive programs and whatnot, that's definitely something that is seen as a recommendation moving through this. I would have to say under government leadership and stepping forward and promoting those types of initiatives to try to push and really force the objectives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Follow up?
Follow on?
Thank you, Mayor. So Director Spagnell, would it assist you if the rest of council, or as council suggested that we do promote solar by adding it into your comments that are going back to the county?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Councillor Hannah. I think solar, or even anything that is considered to be a more efficient way of producing energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and use solar as an example, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Good suggestion. So I think we're making note to add that to the comments. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Reading the news the last little while, there's a move out in BC, and they're looking at, through the building department and the planning department, creating a framework to put net zero buildings into, that's all they're going to be accepting down the road. If you're going to be building something, it's going to have to be net zero. Of course, their climate's much different than ours. I'm just curious, through you, Mayor Allen, to Director Spagnell, has there been a discussion, or are there any of the municipalities that are currently looking at implementing that sort? Because a lot of this is what we can do as a township in-house, but retrofitting would be extremely expensive. However, moving forward, is that part of the plan as well?
Director?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Councillor Cabral. Through my review of the studies that were provided, I can't remember the name of the specific municipalities which are already going down that road or down this road in Ontario, but there are a few of the larger municipalities who have their objectives clearly stated. They have their vision stated, and they are working towards net zero through a policy framework. I can provide that to council at a later date or after this session. Just the names of the municipalities are escaping me, but I know that there is a lot of work that is being done south of the county with respect to net zero, which they're looking at implementing their objectives through their policies and whatnot.
Thank you. Follow on, Mayor Allen. Just curious whether or not that would be the type of comment that should be included here, or whether or not you know if other municipalities have already included comments similar to that.
Director?
Thank you, Marilyn, through to Councillor Cabral. I would have to think that there are similar comments to that. I'm not aware of any of what the other municipalities have submitted to date. But I do know that this is, it's the need, net zero is something that's been in the growth plan for now, I guess, 2 or 3 revisions of the growth plan. And really it's taken some time to go and gain some momentum. But now with the county going through the MCR process, I mean, at the end of the day, when the municipality goes through its official plan review, its update to its new official plan, once this is all completed, there's most likely going to be a need to take a look at a greater vision and provide for more objectives at the local level with respect to climate change.
CEO Schmidt, I see you're on, of course. Is there any discussion in your CAO communications with other municipalities on this topic?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. Ironic enough, there was a communication recently from one of our partners, the Severn Sound Environmental Association has recently reached out seeking to see whether or not the township would be interested in furthering discussions with them. So I believe it was just a communication that came out within the last week. So we're just circulating that amongst ourselves here, and we'll be responding back to the SSEA in due time here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments on this before we go to the next report? Okay, Director Spagnuol, thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. The next report is
sorry. So I think it would be helpful on your offer to send us some information on the other municipalities for council to review and see what else is happening for further discussion. Thank you.
I will do that, Mayor Allen. Thank you. The next study is, and I will say that as far as the review of the watershed management strategy, this was an extensive and comprehensive couple of memorandums that staff reviewed. It's somewhat basically what the report is doing is the county, through their work with Wood Environmental and Infrastructure Solutions, is trying to map out and accurately reflect the watershed management, the watersheds throughout the entire county. They're looking at a number of things. They're looking at the quality of the watersheds. They're looking at the location of the watersheds. They're looking at where the watersheds run through. They're looking at the stresses on the watershed. So in other words, where development is currently going on, where it's proposed, and they're trying to determine what the potential impacts on the watersheds may be, which is a daunting task to say the least, just reading through the reports. Where this goes is the intent of the report is really to establish recommendations to provide for mitigation on the watersheds from the impact that development may have on them. You'll recall that there was a water management plan that was done that included Lake Simcoe, and there was a number of mitigative measures that were brought in, such as reducing the amount of phosphorus loading that was going into the lake. And that was all done through different ways of doing stormwater management. So for example, a low impact development and having water filtered, naturally versus just having it piped and running directly into the lake or into a creek or stream. The purpose of this study is to take a look at the watersheds across the county and come up with a lot of those same mitigation measures resulting from this upfront work that the county is going through. The one thing that staff has indicated in the comments is that it is an extremely important initiative, but because of the amount of information that is contained within the documents and the complexity of what's being dealt with, that there definitely needs to be some form of an executive summary that summarizes the scope of work being completed and the possible outcomes from policy. And I also think, and from staff's perspective, that it's important to identify on a map where the key development areas are that are expected to have the greatest impact on the watersheds. Generally speaking, those would be your settlement areas where you've got high growth pressures. But in addition to that, there's also been, focus on even the agricultural community and the agricultural industry for potential impacts on the subwatershed as well. So when staff was reading through the reports that were provided, that wasn't blatantly clear as to where the stresses lie. Now that might be forthcoming in Memoranda 2. It's a long story about why there's a Memoranda 1 and Memoranda 3, but where's Memoranda 2? Ultimately, the explanation that was provided to me by the county was that the bulk of the work really does lie in Memoranda 2, which is really quantifying and qualifying where exactly all those stresses are and how and what we're dealing with from a watershed perspective. So I think even that explanation would be very helpful if that was provided in an executive summary to identify what the scope of work is, so that it's something that's understandable.
So they concluded and made recommendations in report 3 before finishing report 2.
That's somewhat confusing to me, Mayor Allen. Yes. So I think really this is one of those situations where even when the policies come to the forefront, you don't really know what it's going to look like until you see what the proposed policies say. But at least if there's some form of an executive summary that outlines the scope of work and what's being achieved and why they're doing things in this manner, I think would be helpful to provide for, I would say, some more constructive and I would say better comments with respect to the strategy.
And you recommended that the deadline for comments be extended with respect to this, which is almost a no-brainer, I would think, when the studies aren't complete.
Correct.
Okay. Questions, comments? I'm trying to recall in the report when I went through it, there's no comment or conclusion really that we have enough water in the aquifers, is there?
Mayor Allen, as far as about whether or not there's enough water for servicing, I'm not sure if the study goes into that much depth. I think it's more or less dealing with impacts to the watersheds, so your rivers, your lakes, and the loading that's occurring from a habitat perspective. What the study looks at is it looks at the resource system, it looks at the natural heritage system, and it's looking at how we can address those considerations from a land use planning perspective, but it's also bringing in climate change and all the rest of things. So I'm not sure, I don't recall it going into detail about the aquifers and the impact of the aquifers. I think it was solely related to the watersheds and the health of the watershed throughout the county and what the impact of development may have on them.
Okay, moving to the next report, please.
So Mayor Allen, the next report is staff has referenced this report on a couple of occasions. So growth management is a very big component of the municipal comprehensive review by the county. What it's looking at is establishing a settlement area hierarchy. It's looking at population allocations. It's looking at greenfield densities. and it's looking at intensification targets. So the county released a land needs assessment and an explanatory note on October 1st, 2021. And essentially what that said for Springwater was that essentially there was some, I don't want to say conflicting, but I would say that there was some different information that was provided with respect to the pace of growth in the municipality up to the year of 2031 and 2051. So specifically, the table 1 of the Hemson's report indicates that the population for Springwater would be 34,730 people by 2051, where the township's growth management strategy forecasts that Springwater's population is going to be 37,800 people by 2031. So there's a rather drastic difference in what the forecast says from the work that's been completed by the county compared to the township's growth management strategy. And I should note that the township did submit the growth management strategy to the county for review. So really staff is inquiring as to why there's such a difference in pace of growth compared to what the township's growth management strategy says in comparison to what the county is forecasting. Now, this all transfers into the land needs assessment. And really what the land needs assessment is doing is it's the county's trying to determine how much land the municipality will need in order to accommodate growth up until 2051. So essentially, if the county is using a lesser population number up to 2051, they're indicating that we have enough land to support that population at 2051, and that all the additional population is an overage, which means that there's additional lands that are available for development through their land needs assessment. So that's how that information would be utilized. So essentially, if somebody's looking at this, they could look at it like the township of Springwater is over designated for development.
That seems pretty significant and quite a discrepancy between what we're presuming our growth management is and what the county is. And this isn't the first time it's been brought up. Has there been discussion on this, Director?
There has been direct discussion with county staff as of yet. Staff did go back to WSP, who are the consultants that were working on, the official plan review. We discussed this with Watson, who's the firm that prepared the township's growth management strategy. And really what staff will be doing is if councils receives the comments from staff will be circling back to the county to get clarification as to how they arrived at that number. The next one is even the discrepancy in reviewing the residential units. They both go hand in hand. When you look at what the county's work is showing, is it's showing that there's 9,350 residential units up to 2031, and the township's showing 12,708. And I can say that when I spoke to WSP and I spoke to Watson, they were fairly confident that there was enough of a supply demand to support that. And really that's what they're looking at, is the market trends and what the demand would be for housing, taking a look at the shortage and taking a look at just trends elsewhere, across Ontario and in within the county. So again, that's a pretty big discrepancy, or it's a pretty big difference between what our growth management strategy is saying and what the county's growth work is saying. So
just before we get into discussion, a question about this. It's the same thing with respect to density, is that not right? Which I'm sure you're going to address next.
The density is a little different in that the county is proposing a greenfield density of 45 persons and jobs per hectare. And taking a look at and comparing what they've been prescribing to other municipalities and mainly the municipalities in the northern regional market, which Springwater is considered to be in. That is the density for greenfield development that they're proposing for a number of municipalities. The question of whether or not that can be supported and what the impacts of those densities are on the built form and the planned areas of the municipality. I'm thinking of Midhurst specifically. We would have to take a closer look as to what the impact would be. Mayor Allen, the one thing though, just in the variation to the number of units, in discussions with WSP, the only answer we could find for the discrepancy or the difference between the total number of residential units and the forecast population was that for some reason, it does not look like the special rule that brought in development outside of the population allocations and the growth targets of the growth plan, or any of the tribunal settlements that have been done and completed that would allow development to move forward have been included in that growth work. So it's really a question of painting the picture, the accurate picture, versus excluding certain things that have happened, which allow for development to move forward, outside of those population allocations and some of the parameters of the growth plan.
Well, it certainly wasn't reflected on Schedule 7, but there have been years that have transpired, and this is quite obvious to be the actual case. So how could the consultants be working with blinders and not acknowledge those changes? I can't fathom that.
Again, Mayor Allen, that's why staff is asking to see what was considered as part of this exercise and looking for the rationale behind possibly excluding those. The same question, I can tell you that in some of the technical sessions that I was involved in, the same question came up with respect to MZOs, as to whether MZOs would be considered as part of this process as well.
Well, unless we get this reconciled with the county and they acknowledge the actual numbers, what negative impact will that have on us going forward, Director Spagnuol?
Well, I think firstly, Mayor Allen, it's a question of what we've got for forecasted growth. So if the county comes forward with policies that are going to say that, say, for example, you can only develop up to X amount of units, and you've got infrastructure in the ground that actually provides for more, well, there's a disconnect there, right? So again, it really depends on what the county does with the policies, and how they're going to treat this if the determination is made that somehow the municipality is over designated in land. So it's really painting the accurate picture so that the policies can reflect what can move forward and how it's going to move forward versus something that's an inaccurate picture as to what's actually going on. So that's why in the comments, staff makes the comment about the market trends, and it makes staff make comment about the market trend analysis, and make it very clear that we're experiencing considerable growth on the basis that we've got designations in place where there doesn't seem to be any impediment to growth, and that was not considered, doesn't appear to be considered as part of this process. The other thing, Mayor Allen, is the growth work is also looked at to provide municipalities with an idea of when growth is going to be coming on stream. So from a servicing perspective, we would look at that. From a financial modeling perspective, we would look at it somewhat. So there are definitely implications at not painting the correct picture.
Yeah, and it just seems black and white to me. I mean, we can substantiate the numbers that we have. The county's just not acknowledging those. So it's not a gray area. It's black and white. We're not just pulling them out of the air. they're based on approved legislation and that has happened in the past. So I don't understand the confusion or the discrepancy.
Now, Mayor Allen, the one outcome of this may be that if there's, again, we all love transition policies and transition regulations because they're very clear and they make things easy on everyone. But it all depends on how the policies look when they're formed to deal with this exact question, if it remains the same, if those numbers do not change to reflect what we see happening through our growth management work. So again, it's another review to take a look at how we're going to deal with this from a policy standpoint.
So how does transition policies solve this problem if there's not agreement and reconciliation of the numbers?
Mayor Allen, I raised that just because in the past there's been transition regulations that have been mulled over and read and interpreted, and what they would essentially do is allow for anything that's in the queue to move forward, and then anything that's new would be subject to the new growth forecasts. And that's how I've seen them play out in the past. Now, it's not, and as I said, just based on previous experience in dealing with those regulations, it does cause confusion to the municipalities and to the development community as to what can occur.
Okay, other comments about this, council? This is being a very significant anomaly that is going to cause a world of pain unless we can get them on side with respect to the realistic numbers.
Yeah, and I agree, Mayor Allen. I mean, as I said, there's the servicing implications on this. Is, you're servicing for a certain amount of development. You've got soft services and whatnot that you have to look at providing for, which are contingent on your forecast and what's coming forward. So the accurate picture really does need to be presented. And really, I mean, the question is, if the municipality, when the municipality submitted its growth management strategy, why is the county not taking those numbers and utilizing them as part of their own work?
Well, Director Spagnol and the CAO Schmidt, I guess I have to hear from you when there needs to potentially be some political pressure put on to get this sorted out. So that's for another discussion to follow on. But if we're not getting the results we need to get, then we need to kick it up a notch, I believe.
I think, Mayor Allen, the time when that will occur is when once the work is finalized and they come out with a draft for review and for receipt at the county level, we'll definitely be notified of that in advance. And we'll know what the numbers look like when they bring that report forward.
I just don't want to leave it too late so that the horse is out of the barn and it's too late to adjust the numbers.
Yep. Understood.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn. Through you, Director Spagnol, just for my own information, when it comes to the discrepancy, if the county was to move forward with the numbers that they have in our long-range financial plan and everything that we prepared at the municipal level, I guess simply, does the county's numbers trump ours, or how would that potentially play out?
Director.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through your Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I think for our own purposes, Springwater's own purposes on the long-range financial plan, the municipality can manage its own house. So we're not required to utilize the county's numbers for a long-range financial plan because the municipality's planning how it sees things moving forward. Where I see the difference in the numbers coming into play is for longer term planning where developers want to go forward and say development is moving at a pace as what was forecasted through the township's growth management strategy, is if there's policies under the county plan that are an impediment for that development to move forward because it's moving forward quicker, or more quickly than what was anticipated in the county plan, that could be an issue. And the reason why I say that is because if the municipality is planning accordingly to how growth is proceeding, there's certain things that will come into place that are based on that growth. So you might already have a certain mass moving forward. So for example, let's take the first 3,850 units for Midhurst. And it was identified that that was the mass and that was the number of units that was needed to be able to support a sewage plant. And if there's a policy impediment to additional development coming forward to realize the costs of that infrastructure and to pay for that infrastructure, that could be an impediment that causes an issue down the road if it forms and it takes a place in its policy. So that's what we have to be mindful of. For a long-range financial plan, the township can use its own numbers to try to manage its own house, but it's only when we're talking about Planning Act applications that the county policies would really come into place.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other reporting that you wanted to share with us, Director Spagnuol?
I think the other thing that we need to be cognizant of as well is that, and I mentioned it earlier when we started the discussion, is that the township will be required to update, hopefully, its new official plan once the county's official plan is updated. So what will have to happen is the township's plan will have to reflect the numbers that are here. So to your point, Mayor Allen, the township will need to get this sorted out, or there's a potential for dispute later on down the road when the municipality has to bring its official plan in conformity with the county's new official plan.
Yep.
The other considerations here, one of the key recommendations and that came out of the land needs assessment by the county was the county was supportive of the township's 15% intensification target, just based on the fact that there's limited land within the built boundary to provide for a higher target. Mayor Allen, you mentioned as well about the Greenfield density target of 45 residents and jobs combined per hectare. Currently, the municipality's set density target is 32 residents and jobs per hectare across the board. So 45 residents and jobs combined per hectare is essentially the density that you're looking at in Midhurst, spanned across the settlement areas of the municipality. Now, just to clarify that, where I see this going is there can be greater densities in your major growth areas. So that would be Midhurst and Elmville, where there would have to be higher densities to try to hit that target. And what staff is indicating is we need to take a closer look at that, because the 32 persons or residents and jobs per hectare is what we're currently meeting now. So any increase up to 45 would be a drastic change to what's been planned in Midhurst, and also has a drastic impact on Elmville as well.
So I'll get you a second, Deputy Mayor Collins. I just want to clarify on this one point. So the intensification that we had been talking about in the Bayfield corridor could accept that density, is my understanding, or could allow for that in Midhurst, but there would be a problem getting to that density in Elmville with the existing settlement boundary area. Is that correct?
Mayor Allen, you're correct that the intensification target in Midhurst can definitely be reached and accommodated along the Bayfield Street corridor. Because I mean, you'll recall, council will recall the corridor study that was completed that looks to be building up and increasing densities along the corridor. So it can be accommodated there. However, the impediment in Elmville is there's first of all, there's not enough land in the core area So in the downtown area of Elmville to go and support that in the built boundary. And then in addition to that, there is servicing capacity constraints with respect to sanitary.
So this increasing to 45 is a major problem for us in Spring.
Well, the 45, so the 15% applies to the built boundary. The 45 applies to outside the built boundary. So where, for example, the existing or the planned Midhurst subdivision developments are, the new developments that are ongoing, those are greenfield developments outside of the built boundary. So what this is proposing is similar type density on average across the board, across the municipality. So what that means is you would have to increase your densities in, say, for example, the subdivisions that are being constructed now in Midhurst. You'd have to increase those densities to try to, on average, hit 45 residents and jobs per hectare across the municipality. Otherwise, you would have to span it all the way out, say, to some of the secondary settlement areas. If that's making sense.
And this is a new change as far as expanding the density.
This is a proposed density target that's right in the land needs assessment provided by the county. So what staff is indicating is that there might be additional opportunities in Midhurst to try to intensify within the core areas of the secondary plan. But the impacts to the already planned function of the subdivisions and those core areas would have to be looked at closely. So one example of how you would do that is if you have in the core neighborhoods, there's higher densities in the center portions of those neighborhoods. And essentially what those allow you to do is build up to increase the densities. And those are the types of considerations that staff would have to look at to see if there could be potentially a slight increase, but 45 seems to be excessive.
Yep. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn, and through you. Is the 45 a county-wide target, or is that specific municipality to municipality?
Director.
Through Marilyn to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. It's specific to municipality to municipality. The county has provided the same type of density, I would say, to a couple of our neighbors. However, when you go down to the what they'll call the major settlement areas, they're higher greenfield densities than that. Some are going, I believe it was up to 65 residents and jobs per hectare.
Follow on.
Thank you. So our neighbors to the north, be it Severn, Tay, Tiny, would you suggest that they have similar targets? Or I find that these targets are really changing the dynamic of Springwater, of what and why people choose to live here. And I think that these are going to make us look more like the neighbors to the south rather than the neighbors to the north. And while I'm all for welcoming people to our community, councils before us and our council are really trying to make sure that we have the ability to ensure that we keep our rural nature while we move into more of an urban setting. So earlier this evening, yourself and Mayor Allen were speaking to the cart and the horse. So is this something that we should, as a council, be speaking to the county? This seems like an unrealistic target to me, and one that will definitely change the way we look at Springwater. I know that we've looked at estate lots not being available anymore. We're compressing the areas that we do have, and this in itself really, in my opinion, changes the way Springwater will continue to look in the future.
Director.
Mayor Allen, through to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. So the densities and I think it's a fair statement when talking about how it's going to change the complexion of Springwater's communities. Really what the intended purpose of the targets is to provide for increased density. So that's supposed to translate into townhomes, buildings, more semis. Now, the one thing that I think is important to note is that that doesn't necessarily mean that you would put that density in each settlement area. What would happen is the municipality would have to take a look at that if that density was to come into place and identify where the appropriate places are where you can intensify with buildings, townhomes, semis, and things of higher densities. And it's in those areas where you would focus that growth to try to, on average, across the board, hit that 45 residents and combined jobs per hectare. Again, the principle behind it is that there needs to be a variety of housing to provide for more affordable housing. Now, affordability, we don't want to get into that definition because then we'll be here for another hour and 15 minutes at least. But I think what just needs to be recognized is that at the end result would be that the municipality would have to pinpoint where it could hit those densities and where it should go. And with the expectation and with the thoughtfulness not to considerably detract and alter from the character of the municipality. And it's a very tough task to do. What staff is saying as it relates to the Midhurst secondary plan is what essentially you would have happen is you would have all these higher densities on the outer fringes, on development on the fringes of the, I wouldn't say fringes, but say the outskirts or the outer limits of the built boundary. And you would have this impact to have higher densities on the outside of the built boundary, which contradicts what you're trying to do when you're building a downtown core where you're having your higher densities at the core area. So you're essentially building up on the outside and the inside built boundary is staying the same within the village.
Follow on.
Thank you. And this might be a little off topic, but has there been discussion about the at-home or remote working increasing the jobs per influence on that?
I would have to look into that. Sorry, Mayor Allen. Through Mayor Allen, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I'd have to look into that to see on how that number's been rearranged to reflect that. I would have to think that there is an impact on that for sure.
Thank you.
Director Spagna, what would happen? I mean, you state as a comment, the density target of 45 residents and jobs is problematic. What if we strengthened that and said that we can, that we want to remain at the current density target of 32 residents and jobs per hectare, and not increase that any further?
So Mayor Allen, the comments that were provided by staff when the county initiated its section 26 meeting, I believe that was in June. Yes, it was June. Staff relayed those comments that the density, Greenfield density of 32 jobs, residents and jobs per hectare was recommended, and the county is coming forward with the 45.
And as you said, is that 45 being used except for the more populated southern municipalities where you say it goes up to 60?
Yeah,
65?
Mayor Allen, for quite a few of them, yes, the 45 is the standard that's being recommended as part of the county's growth work.
In Simcoe, are there any lesser densities than 45 that they're trying to impose?
I would have to take a look, Mayor Allen. Now, the one thing is I can provide the information on that. There's a chart that the county provided as part of its LNA work, which shows what the densities that are being recommended, and it outlines by municipality, and I can send that to council after the meeting tonight.
I would just, I mean, we state that it's problematic, and they, you know, that won't, I don't think, resonate with them, rather than, you know, the maximum we could go to would be X sort of thing, just to push back with a number, because they're not going to adjust the 45 just by hearing that it's problematic.
Yeah, and Mayor Allen, that's why in staff's comments, we essentially said that there may be the opportunity to meet a higher density, and we need to take a closer look at it as to where those opportunities might lie and what that might look like as part of this whole consideration of the density targets.
there may be an opportunity to reach a higher density than what?
Then the 32.
But we're going back to them by saying overall, we can't meet a 45 density? Is that what you're saying?
Mayor Allen, we're saying that it will be problematic to meet a 45 density, and that there might be opportunities to have a slightly higher density than 32. But we need to take a look at where those opportunities lie and what that might look like, along with what are the impacts to the municipality.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, that's been good clarification. Thank you, Director Spagno.
You're welcome, Mayor Allen.
I think with the comments, a couple of additions or tweaks that have come up from this, that's good response. But what's your estimate of next steps with respect to these comments, a time frame, and getting back to us? And
Mayor Allen, I think the county's got a fairly aggressive schedule here to try to have their MCR completed. I think that they want to try to have their reports received by county council. I want to say it's before the new year. So there's going to be some aggressive timeframes to come back. So the way this will go is staff will prepare the comments, submit the comments prior to November 12th. And then there's going to have to be further dialogue between the county and the local and the area municipalities. And at that point, there will have to be a recommendation report coming from the county at some point in time. Again, asking county council to receive the reports as revised, if they're revised. And then Springwater Council and township staff can provide additional comments as we move through the process. And also keeping in mind that the county still needs to go and prepare an employment strategy and finalize that and submit that for review, or release that for review. And in addition to that, they also need to prepare official plan policies to implement what their findings are. So there will be dialogue going through the process even after this, once we see what the county comes back with.
so you would expect response to these comments before finalization by the county and submission to county council?
Yes, Mayor Allen.
Okay.
Now, it may be in the form of a release report for consideration, and staff would be notified of when that report is going to be released to be able to provide comment. And even similar to the township's official plan process, even if those reports are received and accepted by council, county council, and received, there's still opportunity for comment on the policy front as well.
Okay, but you would expect to, on the numbers, on the LNA discrepancies, you would expect to hear back some direct response to try to get towards reconciling or clarifying the numbers, would you, Director?
Yes, staff will be looking to do that immediately.
Yeah.
Once staff has the comments out and council's, if council's okay with submitting these comments, then that'll be the next step is reaching out to the county and discussing the difference in the numbers.
Okay. All right, council, before reading the motion, any final comments? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Director Spagno or Manager Spagno. When it's all said and done, all this mapping that's being done, that pertains to us, Springwater Township, do we get to keep this? Does it come to us? What happens to it?
Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Ritchie. What will happen is that mapping will be incorporated into the provincial plans as the agricultural system mapping, and that will form where the policies of the province will be applied to.
Go ahead, Councillor Ritchie.
Mary Ellen, why I'm asking this question is this mapping that's being done, which is the most up-to-date, extensive, and such a high cost. Why can't we obtain this mapping, but that pertains to Springwater Township, and use this mapping in planning and in with our building department, and take this job away from the MVCA that has their mapping, which is the same mapping basically that they're being done here now. And if there's any difference, then do it so that it'd be the same as what the MVCA has, and save ourselves $40,000, $50,000 a year. Because every time you go to the counter, you've got to pay a fee for them to look at their mapping, and they guard it very heavily. And this is one way, all this mapping that's being done, why couldn't we do this in-house? Because other municipalities that do not have MVCA, they have their own mapping. They can tell you right there and then, and why can't we move toward this? And this is one thing that we could cut the MVCA out of and save ourselves money. And this is worth working forward down the line. And I see this time and again over the years. This is extensive mapping, spending a lot of money. Why can't we take this ourselves and implement it in our planning departments, in our building departments, and do it in-house without the MVCA getting involved? And that's
Comments
a
on
comment
that,
I wanna
Director
make tonight.
Spagnuolo?
Mayor Allen, through to Councilor Ritchie. The only thing I think I could say to that just in response is that the county is going through this mapping process because the province is requiring them to do that, to refine the provincial mapping. So this represents a county process. The NVCA has its own regulation mapping and whatnot, which is prescribed through a different set of legislation. But this is a county process which the province is requiring the county to go through and refine their mapping.
Follow on, Councilor Ritchie.
I just want to say there's going to be changes coming down, maybe not till after the next election next year. There will be changes coming to these conservation authorities, and this mapping will become very important at that time that we could get our hands on it and do this ourselves without the need of them. And that would take a huge monkey off our backs. That's all I have to say. Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work too.
Certainly with the regulations that are coming vis-a-vis the mandatory core and non-core activities of the conservation authorities, that will be reviewed during that process. So it will be discussed as to the similarity of mapping and the degree to which NVCA gets involved in mapping versus the municipalities. So that's topical and timely, and it will be reviewed. Okay, the motion reads that the report of the Director of Planning Services regarding the Simcoe County Municipal Comprehensive Review Springwater comments dated November 8, 2021 be received, and that staff be authorized to submit township comments as generally outlined in Appendix A to the report, and that additional comments from council also be submitted to the county for consideration prior to the November 12, 2021 deadline. All those in favor? That is carried. Again, thank you, Director Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw, please. Councillor Ma Chapman and Councillor Ritchie, that the bylaw 2021-108 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on November 8, 2021 listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That is carried. Mover and seconder to adjourn, please. Councillor Cabral, Councillor Moore, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 6:29 p.m. To meet again at a regular meeting on November 17, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.